This roundtable is a culmination of a long process of rethinking what tolerance actually means. 11 years ago, I started examining the possibility how to consolidate absolutely different concepts of security and tolerance. We urgently need a new thinking for a diverse society, accepted not only by leaders of the free world, but also the civil society in general. The last is more important because of its irrevocable impact on legislation, which is our final goal. The ECTR research grants will support new thinking on secure tolerance in many contexts and disciplines. The culmination of this creative process will be the bestowal of the Cantor Prize for Secure Tolerance. It will be accompanied with a financial reward of €1 million. The prize will be granted for exceptional achievements in research and advanced thinking on secure tolerance. The first prize will be awarded in 1-2 years from now, and it is intended to be awarded every 2 years after.
Now, I think what this requires is a framework, an intellectual framework, and this is the importance of bringing the thinkers that are here today together. It requires an intellectual framework that makes sense of that context and that paradox. And it understands that in all our societies, there's got to be a space for diversity where people worship in their own way, where people have a sense of their own culture and are able to express it in the way that they wish to, but where also there is a common space, where certain values are held in common and are inviolable as part of that common space.
I'm particularly pleased to welcome you here today and welcome you in Monaco for this very important ECTR conference. The goal is to share thoughts on tackling extremism and intolerance in a diverse society. It's a highly topical issue, of course, that gives rise to much anxiety, but also it holds out many paths for thought and I hope acts. Monaco, with great cultural diversity and nearly 140 different nationalities, grants special importance to education in human rights and the idea of citizens' rights. This is taught at schools amongst the very young. Of course, my speech would not be complete if I failed to recognize the work conducted by ECTR since its inception in October 2008 at the initiative of Moshe Kantor, Alexander Kwasniewski, the former president of Poland, who I wish to greet particularly. Tolerance is a founding value and the sine qua non for living in society in a unified world as we know it today. It does not apply to people, but to the way one thinks and acts. This is something you cannot decree. It is something you grow up with, and this is what makes it so difficult.
Thank you very much, Your Highness. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you that already last year, the ECTR has decided to bestow the 2018 European Medal of Tolerance to His Serene Highness Prince Albert of Monaco for his personal contribution to historical justice, for truth and reconciliation between nations. And availing the opportunity of Your Highness' presence in our opening of our roundtable, we would like to bestow this medal in a small but special ceremony.
I think it's also appropriate because of all the qualities you demonstrated in the speech just now, because you showed that you have a genuinely global view and that you recognize that commitment on things like conservation, education, development, support for young people, all your contributions to sport, all of them go into the same space and flow from the same basic values. And it's therefore a very great privilege to present you with this honour, which is well merited, and which is because of your recognition of the past and your words which allowed the process of healing to take place. Thank you.
Your Serene Highness, the European Medal of Tolerance is conferred to you because of your exceptional personal leadership and inspiration to advance truth, tolerance, and historical reconciliation.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Maybe a warm applause for His Serene Highness.
Mr. President, Right Honorable Tony Blair, Chairman of ECTR, Your Excellencies, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, I am humbled and extremely grateful for this recognition. The promotion of international tolerance, reconciliation, and education, for which we must work hard at, in my view, are of paramount importance in order for us to build a more balanced world, a world of solidarity and peace. And so I will continue, not only as head of state, but as simply as a human being, to ensure that my actions, that the actions of my country will be worthy of the trust that you have shown to me at this moment today. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best of success with this roundtable.
Thank you, and please enjoy lunch.
Dr. Cantor has written, tolerance is insecure in the form that we have it now, and if we want to make it secure, we have to think about it anew. And I suppose one of my contributions here is to point out that when we do that, when we think about tolerance again in trying to renew it, we can actually learn by going back to the original understanding of toleration and tolerance in Europe in the early modern period, when it was developed not really as a part of a theory of human rights. The idea of toleration was developed by Spinoza, John Locke, Milton, the great English poet, Montaigne, great skeptical writer, as part of a project, the project of enabling different communities, different traditions, different forms of life and styles of life to coexist productively and creatively together. In other words, it was not simply a negative idea. It wasn't simply that people shouldn't be persecuted, though they shouldn't be, or that there should be religious freedom. It was the idea of a creative and productive modus vivendi in society, which would extend right across society. In this new territory, we need new thinking. And I think that's what I'll try and contribute, and what we all will here. But I'd like to encourage you all to think that when we're thinking in this way, we're not actually scrapping any aspect of the ideal of toleration and of tolerance. What we're doing, I think, at least in part, is going back to its origin, its original meaning, which was a positive meaning, not a negative meaning. And that requires action by governments. It requires maybe a new kind of legal code of the sort that Dr. Cantor has suits, really being ready to at least consider withdrawing some of the elements of toleration from people who don't believe it and to attack it. As I say, I mean, one of the most perverse forms of tolerance which can possibly be imagined is the perverse tolerance of racism and anti-Semitism, which is now at the highest levels of some of the most liberal parties in Europe, allegedly liberal, who used to be liberal. But I think the point is really that the new intolerance is one of the areas in which we're going to have to confront when we talk about the problem of tolerance today. I mean, the perverse intolerance, the intolerance which tolerates or even practices intolerance itself. So what does that mean for us now? I think I'd conclude by these remarks. Here's a reference which perhaps will surprise you. I'm not a Marxist. I was an active anti-communist in my period as a Thatcherite. I've learned a lot from Marx, but I've never been a Marxist, and I've always been strongly opposed to Marxist thinkers. But let me break a habit of a lifetime and quote one because we've been talking and thinking about Italy, and quote one I think is quite interesting. Gramsci, the great Italian Marxian theorist. He had this idea of what he called an interregnum. And he said there was an interregnum was when the old couldn't die and nothing could be born instead. And he said during that period, you'll see lots of morbid symptoms. That was his phrase when translated. Politics will be made up of morbid symptoms. Well, I can't think of a better way of describing Trump or much of European, or Mr. Salvini, or much of European or American politics today. Morbid symptoms. Again, the one which stands out above any other, to my mind, is the resurgence, including in liberal circles, of anti-Semitism. But what would it mean to get beyond this era of morbid symptoms? I think it would, in the first place, really mean accepting that we are surrounded by morbid symptoms. Things aren't going very well in European politics. Things could easily get worse, and these symptoms could become more morbid even than they are, unless politicians of the liberal centre and of the moderate right and the moderate left choose to address them directly and see these morbid symptoms as signs of deeper ailments which have got to be considered in a more fundamental and fresh way. And that's really my message tonight, which is that philosophy for once, or at least careful, rigorous philosophical thinking, has a practical and a moral responsibility attached to it, as well as being something that philosophers do to convince themselves that they're wiser than the rest of humanity. Thank you.